Sergeant Ethan Cole stood beneath the shimmering lights of the Galactic Unity Center's Grand Assembly Hall, doing his best not to look as uneasy as he felt. Hundreds of beings, scholars, soldiers, diplomats, explorers, waited as the interspecies bonding program announced pair after pair. Every match so far looked safe, predictable, designed for harmony rather than challenge. Ethan respected the initiative. He believed in peace building. He just didn't think the algorithm would throw him into a death sentence. Then the coordinator spoke his name. Sergeant Ethan Cole of Earth, matched with Princess Karanith of the Vraxian Dominion. The silence that followed felt like the entire hall inhaled at once. A ripple of alarm spread through the room. Someone muttered, "No way," another whispered, "Why would the system do that?" Ethan's pulse spiked. The Vraxian Dominion, a military civilization feared even by their allies. Their soldiers trained from childhood, their leaders forged through ritualized combat. They respected strength, victory, and nothing else. And Karanith, the Black Blade of Vrax, survival trial champion, rumored to have disarmed a grown assassin at 14 without drawing breath. Every other pairing had been built for compatibility. Ethan's match felt like a cosmic joke. The hall's massive entrance doors parted. Karanith entered with a predatory stillness that made even hardened warriors tense. She towered above most species, her physique carved by years of unforgiving training. Bioluminescent markings pulsed across her skin, deep electric blues laced with volatile reds. To a Vraxian, this was the emotional equivalent of bared fangs. Her armor, ceremonial yet tactical, caught the light like sharpened obsidian. Every step she took was silent, controlled, lethal. When her eyes found Ethan, something cold and analytical flickered in them, as if she were evaluating a weapon unworthy of its sheath. Her first words sliced through the hall. "This is absurd. You are the human I am bound to. You look fragile, soft, a miscalculation." Ethan forced a steady breath. "Sergeant Ethan Cole," he introduced himself formally. "We don't have to be perfectly matched, too. Do not mistake this for partnership." Her voice was low, dangerous. "If the algorithm believes you can stand beside me, then your algorithm is defective. I honor this match only because my father commands it, not because you have earned it." The room felt colder. Program Coordinator Dr. Lion Voss hurried toward them, voice strained with practiced diplomacy. "Princess Karanith, Sergeant Cole, please understand, the algorithm rarely miscalculates. Your pairing may appear unusual, but long-term synergy is predicted at A. I do not care for predictions. Strength is proven, not forecast, Doctor." Ethan had dealt with aggressive species before, but Karanith radiated something far more intense. Disciplined hostility. Not random, not emotional, trained. She was built for war. Ethan preferred negotiations. This was going to be a problem. The ceremony concluded with every pair exchanging polite greetings, except them. Karanith stood rigid, markings burning a steady crimson warning. Ethan could almost feel her disdain, sharp as static in the air. When her guard approached to escort them, she turned to Ethan with chilling calm. "On Caldera 9, do not slow me. Do not interfere with my routines. And do not assume you can contribute to my survival." Ethan held her gaze. "I don't plan to slow you down, but survival isn't the only. Survival is everything." She left him standing in her wake like an afterthought. On the transport to the frontier world, Karanith sat perfectly still, arms crossed, gaze fixed forward. Ethan tried twice to start a conversation. Both attempts died under her silence. Their assigned dwelling on Caldera 9 was functional, compact, and designed for two species with very different needs. Karanith entered first, scanned the room once, and declared, "Inefficient layout. Half of this must be removed. Your kind surrounds itself with objects to feel secure, weakness disguised as comfort." Ethan blinked. "We need furniture, chairs help, tables help, that's kind of universal. You may keep one." "That's not," he paused, realizing logic would bounce off her like an empty bullet casing. "That's not a practical amount of furniture for two people." Her markings flared. "Adapt human or stay out of my way." Ethan exhaled slowly, resisting the urge to rub his temples. The bonding program wanted. Caldera 9 twin moons hung low as Ethan and Karanith stepped out of the transport shuttle and approached the settlement that would serve as their home for the next 6 months. The outpost was small, barely 200 inhabitants, built from a blend of architectural styles that showed the fingerprints of every species contributing to the project. Warm lights glowed in the windows. Voices echoed in the distance. It looked peaceful. Karanith hated it instantly. This settlement is exposed, vulnerable, poorly defended. Ethan sighed. It's a cooperative frontier colony, not a military base. Then its creators lack foresight. Their shared housing unit was positioned near the edge of the settlement. A modest domicile with dual-species accommodations, and a common living area neither of them seemed eager to acknowledge. The moment the door hissed open, Karenith moved through the space like a commander inspecting barracks. She pushed aside chairs, lifted the table as if testing its durability, and tapped the wall panels with the blunt efficiency of someone evaluating stress points. The architecture is weak, the materials too light, and what is this cushioning? Why would a warrior sit on something this soft? It's called a sofa, Ethan said, dropping his duffel. You sit on it to relax. Relaxation is a liability. Not for humans. Then humans are poorly designed. Ethan bit the inside of his cheek. Good start. The first hour set the tone for the evening. Every step Ethan took seemed to offend her. Every suggestion she made seemed designed to test his patience. When Ethan asked about establishing a schedule for shared spaces, Karenith responded. Schedules are for those who lack discipline. When he proposed a rotation for meal preparation, she said, I hunt, you boil things, that is enough. When he mentioned needing quiet in the evenings, she stared at him like he'd said he required air scented with lavender. Silence is unnatural. Sound reveals strength. Weakness hides in quiet places. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. You know we're supposed to be learning from each other. That's the whole point. Karenith turned to him, arms crossing over her armored chest. I learn from challengers, equals, adversaries worthy of sharpening my blade, not from someone who fears noise. Ethan's voice dropped, calmer than he felt. I don't fear noise. I just like reading without having to yell every 5 seconds to concentrate. She blinked, markings shifting in confusion. Reading is optional, combat is not. This was like negotiating with a thunderstorm. By the time night fell, Ethan had moved half his belongings into the secondary sleeping area just to keep the peace. Karenith had already cleared the floor for morning combat conditioning, which apparently required enough space to fight a small bear. Ethan lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Karenith sharpening her blades in the next room. Each strike of metal on stone, an aggressive reminder that his new roommate was biologically optimized for violence. 6 months, he thought, 6 months of this, but something else tugged at him beneath the frustration. She was disciplined, focused, relentless, everything about her radiated purpose, and maybe there was something to learn there. The next morning began with an earthquake, or at least, that's what Ethan thought until he realized the tremors were rhythmic. Karenith was training outside, slamming her boots into the packed dirt, slicing through the air with dual blades that hummed like angry wasps. Her movements were terrifyingly precise, almost beautiful in their efficiency. She flowed from stance to stance with the confidence of someone who had lived her entire life inside the geometry of combat. Ethan watched for a moment, arms crossed, breath clouding in the morning chill. She finished a sequence and spun toward him. You rise late, a flaw. It's 6 in the morning. The strong rise before the light. You didn't even sleep. Rest is for the inefficient. Ethan rubbed his temples. Karenith, we have duties today. Orientation briefings, settlement protocols. Those can wait, you will train. Train what? Your body, it is insufficient. Ethan gave a thin smile. Thanks. Karenith tossed a practice blade at his feet, its metal hilt thudding into the dirt. Pick it up. I must know the limits of the human the Dominion has foolishly tied to me. Ethan stared at the weapon. We haven't even had breakfast. Weakness speaks through excuses. He picked up the blade. Their first spar lasted 30 seconds. Karenith didn't strike him. She simply moved, and Ethan realized instantly how outmatched he was. She was faster than any human soldier he'd trained with. Stronger, too. She didn't even attack. She just analyzed him, her eyes narrowed, markings shifting in faint amusement. When the practice ended, she stepped back with a cool assessment. You lack strength, but you learn quickly. Surprising. That almost sounds like a compliment. Do not assume. I merely acknowledge data. And yet her markings glowed faintly with blue. Approval. A small one hidden under pride, but unmistakable. Ethan had read about Vraxian emotional cues. They were honest to a fault. They could not hide their light. This was her version of praise. Before he could respond, the settlement alarm pulsed, one long low note signaling a mandatory meeting. Karenith adjusted her armor. Duty calls. Let us see how this colony functions. I expect incompetence. Ethan smirked despite himself. Is that a prediction or a hope? Both. They walked toward the central plaza, side by side yet clearly not together. One trying to understand the situation, the other judging every stone on the ground. But something had shifted. The friction was still there, sharp and constant, but beneath it something new flickered. The settlement briefing was supposed to be simple. Introductions, responsibilities, safety protocols, nothing dramatic. But nothing involving Karanith ever stayed simple. The gathering took place in the open central plaza, under Caldera 9 pale morning sun. Representatives from multiple species stood in a loose circle, exchanging polite greetings. Ethan tried to listen, but Karanith's constant low, growling commentary made focus nearly impossible. Their defensive grid is insufficient, their patrol rotation is laughable, and their commander, look at him. His spine bends when he speaks. A disgrace, Ethan whispered. We're not evaluating a war front, we're meeting neighbors. Neighbors are liabilities during conflict. Good thing we're not in one. Karanith didn't reply. Instead, she stiffened. Her markings flashed a sudden crimson flare. Ethan followed her gaze. A Caldoran ranger sprinted into the plaza, panic distorting his usually serene features. Razorwing, incoming from the northern ridge. The atmosphere detonated. Settlers scattered instantly, some rushing for shelters, others pulling children toward reinforced bunkers. Alarms wailed across the settlement as dust drifted from rooftops. The ground trembled faintly, a low thrum traveling through the packed soil. Ethan felt the vibration in his bones. He knew that sound. Razorwings weren't predators, they were natural disasters with wings. Massive bladed creatures evolved to carve through anything in their territory. Territorial, relentless, fast, Karanith didn't retreat, she stepped forward. Her voice dropped into a calm, predatory register. Finally, something worthy of effort. Let Karanith wait, Ethan shouted, but she was already moving. The Razorwing burst over the ridge like a living guillotine, 6 meters of armored muscle and jagged wing blades that shimmered with deadly iridescence. It shrieked, a piercing metallic cry that rattled windows and sent birds scattering across the sky. Karanith sprinted toward it head-on. Ethan's instincts kicked in. His military training wasn't built for direct confrontation with apex predators, but for battlefield coordination, and that meant acting fast. Everyone off the main road, Ethan yelled. Form staggered firing lines, keep distance, don't cluster. Several armed settlers listened immediately, snapping into formation. Others hesitated until Ethan barked orders with a sharpness that cut through fear. He pointed toward elevated platforms, clear angles, blind spots. Karanith launched herself at the Razorwing. Blades met bone with a sound like shattering glass. She dodged the creature's first swipe, its bladed wing slicing a deep trench where she'd been standing a heartbeat earlier. Her movements were shockingly fast, fluid, and brutal at once. She struck its flank, drawing a shriek and a spray of iridescent blood. Ethan watched, stunned by the precision at which she fought. She wasn't reckless. She was calculating, testing its patterns, reading its angles. But the Razorwing adapted quickly. It reared back, wings folding like enormous serrated fans before striking with the force of a falling boulder. Karanith braced. Karanith left side weak, Ethan shouted. It's guarding its right flank, overshift your balance. She didn't question. She pivoted instantly, sliding under the Razorwing's sweeping wing, driving her blade into the joint beneath its armor. The creature buckled. She turned her head just enough to shout, breathless, You see well for a soft blood. Compliment noted. Ethan yelled back. The Razorwing, wounded and enraged, shifted its attention toward the settlers, but Ethan was already seeing the pattern. Its right wing dragged slightly, its attack angle tightened under stress, and each time it inhaled, its chest briefly exposed a softer patch hidden beneath layered plates. Karanith, Ethan shouted again, chest left of center. Tucks in when it inhales, that's your shot. She didn't hesitate. With a roar that shook the air, she drove forward, using a fallen support beam as a ramp, launching herself into the creature's exposed chest as it reared up for another screech. Her blade pierced deep, straight into the weak point Ethan identified. The Razorwing collapsed with a seismic thud. Dust settled slowly, silence followed, then cheers erupted across the plaza. Karanith stood atop the carcass, chest rising with heavy breaths, markings glowing with a wild, powerful blue, the Vraxian sign of triumph. Blood stained her armor in jagged lines. She looked down at Ethan. Your tactical insight was useful. That almost sounds like a compliment. Do not be greedy. You have earned one, only one. She jumped down, landing lightly despite the weight of her armor. For the first time since meeting her, Ethan saw something in her expression that wasn't contempt. Respect, a spark of curiosity, a subtle shift, small enough to miss, huge enough to matter. "Good work," Ethan said quietly. Karenith tilted her head, studying him in a way that felt less like an evaluation of weakness and more like the beginning of something else. "You fought with clarity and courage. Perhaps the algorithm did not malfunction after all." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but the settlement commander rushed toward them, breathless. "We need a debrief. Now." The Razorwing wasn't acting normally, something spooked it from the wild zone. Karenith's markings dimmed into a thoughtful violet. "Then trouble approaches. Good, this colony needs sharpening." Ethan exhaled. This wasn't just friction anymore. This was the beginning of a partnership, unstable, volatile, dangerous. In the hours following the Razorwing attack, the settlement buzzed with frantic activity. Medics tending to minor injuries, engineers inspecting damaged structures, security teams recalibrating defense grids. Amid the chaos, Karenith stood at the center like a fixed point in a storm, issuing clipped assessments, and reminding anyone who approached that their weaknesses were structural, avoidable, and deeply embarrassing. Ethan walked beside her, exhausted but strangely energized. People kept approaching him, thanking him, shaking his hand, telling him how his quick thinking saved lives. Karenith listened without expression, but her markings glowed a steady blue, approval she was trying and failing to hide. When the commander finally released them for the day, Ethan expected Karenith to immediately begin another round of training or audits. Instead, she said, "We will patrol the perimeter tonight, together." Ethan blinked, together. "I do not repeat myself." He almost smiled. Almost. Night fell fast on Caldera 9, bringing a thin mist that curled around the settlement walls. Twin moons hung above them, one pale gold, one deep violet, casting soft, shifting shadows over the terrain. Their patrol route wound beyond the settlement lights, through rock formations and low shrubs that whispered when the wind passed. Karenith walked silently at first, every step calculated. Ethan kept pace, aware that she was evaluating him with each movement. Eventually, she spoke. "Your reaction today, it was not luck. You anticipated the creature's behavior before I did." Ethan shrugged lightly. "Human soldiers are trained to analyze patterns fast. Helps when you're not physically gifted enough to punch problems." Karenith stopped walking and turned to him. "Strength is not solely measured in muscle or speed. Pattern recognition is a weapon. Today, you wielded it well." Coming from her, the words felt almost unreal. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. Her markings shifted slowly, like dawn creeping across dark mountains. Soft blue, a color he had learned meant sincerity. Then, as if embarrassed by her own honesty, she added, "It was acceptable." Ethan laughed, breath fogging the cool air. "High praise." They continued walking, tension easing into something unfamiliar, something almost like comfort. When their patrol path reached the overlooking ridge, Karenith sat down on a flat stone without ceremony. Ethan joined her, watching the settlement glow softly in the distance. For a few moments, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward this time, it was peaceful. Then Karenith broke it. "When I was chosen for the bonding program, I believed it was punishment." Ethan glanced over. She wasn't looking at him. Her gaze was fixed on the moons, expression unreadable. "My father wished to expand our diplomatic skill set." She almost spat the phrase. "He forced all his heirs into this initiative, but for me, he said I must learn restraint. That war will not shape the next century. That Vrax must adapt." "That's not punishment," Ethan said gently. "That's trust. That is control." Her voice sharpened. "He believes I am too rigid, too volatile, too bound to the old ways." Ethan considered her for a moment. The way she held herself like a blade always half-drawn, the discipline in every breath, the ferocity she wielded as naturally as breath. "He didn't send you here because you're unfit," Ethan said. "He sent you here because you're the one most capable of surviving something new." Karenith finally turned toward him. Her markings flickered, shock, then contemplation. "You speak as if you understand Vraxian leaders." "I understand pressure," Ethan replied quietly. "Expectations, responsibility you didn't choose, being told to become something you're not sure you can be." Her eyes sharpened, not in anger but in recognition. "You have carried losses." Ethan looked down at the dirt between his boots. "Yeah, during the border conflicts, I lost friends, good ones. Vraxian soldiers were involved." Karenith didn't flinch. "Then why join a program that binds you to one of us?" Because I'm tired of cycles, Ethan murmured. Someone has to break them. I figured I'd start somewhere I least expected. Silence fell again, but a different silence, not tense, not defensive, reflective. Finally, Karenith asked, "Do you regret being matched with me?" Ethan was surprised by the softness in her tone, so subtle that most species wouldn't have noticed. But he heard it and it mattered. He took a slow breath. "Honestly, I thought it was a mistake at first. But today, watching you fight, seeing how you think, how you move, how you commit yourself completely, I realized something." Karenith leaned slightly closer, unable to help herself. "And what is that?" "You're not impossible to work with, just intense." He smiled, overwhelmingly intense. Karenith blinked at him, unaccustomed to playful honesty. Her markings responded involuntarily, a swirl of purple-blue, confused yet amused. "You speak boldly for someone who can barely lift one of my practice blades. And you judge boldly for someone who nearly got knocked off their feet by a rock formation today." She stiffened. That rock was positioned deceptively. Ethan grinned. Sure it was. Karenith stared at him for a long moment, then. A sound escaped her, a small one barely audible, but unmistakably. A laugh, short, sharp, like she didn't quite understand why her body made the sound. Ethan's chest warmed in a way he hadn't expected. Karenith stood abruptly, as if realizing she'd shown too much. "We return. This patrol is complete." But when they walked 3 days after the Razorwing attack, a distress signal disrupted the settlement's early morning routines. A survey team exploring the northern wild zone had missed 2 scheduled check-ins, an immediate red flag. The commander scanned the gathered settlers, his voice tight. "We're stretched thin. We need a team capable of handling unpredictable terrain and potential predators." Karenith didn't wait for his next words. "We will retrieve them." Ethan blinked. "We will." She didn't bother answering. She simply tossed him a compact survival kit and walked toward the armory with the confidence of someone assigning duty, not requesting it. The commander exhaled with visible relief. "You're the only pair with demonstrated field synergy. If anyone can find them, it's you two." Ethan wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. Probably both. The wild zone began mere kilometers beyond the settlement, yet felt like a different planet entirely. Dense metallic foliage, fractured basalt cliffs, and strange crystalline formations humming faintly under shifting light. Caldera 9 wasn't hostile by design, it was hostile by nature. Karenith navigated the terrain without hesitation, reading the land with warrior-trained instinct. Ethan used a holomapper, coordinating routes, marking hazardous zones, tracking energy signatures. Their pace, though different in style, matched perfectly. Hours passed, but the deeper they pushed into the wild zone, the more unsettling the signs became. A torn satchel snagged on a crystalline root, deep claw marks gouged into rock, boot prints trailing off into impossible directions. Ethan crouched by one print touching the edge. These weren't made while running, they were dragged. Karenith studied the marks, her jaw tightening. Something pursued them, something large. And smart, Ethan pointed at a shifted trail pattern. They tried to confuse their pursuer, but something forced them to change direction. Karenith's markings flashed a sharp red-orange. Fear. Not hers, her interpretation of the scene. They followed the broken trail until dusk bled across the horizon. When night finally descended, Caldera's air chilled rapidly, mist rising from the ground in ghost-like veils. Ethan set down his pack. "We should make camp, we won't track anything blind." Karenith scanned the area. "This place is exposed, but you are correct. Humans require rest. I notice you keep saying that like it's a flaw." Most truths sound like flaws to the fragile. Ethan chuckled softly. That was almost poetic. Karenith gave him a look, suggesting she'd rather swallow a blade than be called poetic. They set up camp beside a jagged formation that broke the wind. Ethan ignited a small thermal fire module, the artificial flame casting a warm, gold glow across the stone. Karenith sat across from him, legs crossed, posture straight as a spear. The shimmering heat made her markings shimmer like liquid night. After a long silence, she spoke. "You navigate terrain well, even without superior senses." Ethan raised an eyebrow. Was that a compliment? A tactical acknowledgement? "I'll take it." The fire crackled softly between them. In its light, Karenith seemed different. Less like a weapon forged by tradition, more like someone stripped of armor she didn't realize she wore. Her gaze lingered on Ethan longer than usual. "When we fought the Razorwing," she began slowly. You did not hesitate to involve yourself despite knowing you lacked physical advantage. Why? Because people were going to die, Ethan said simply. And because you were standing between a monster and civilians, I wasn't going to leave you alone with that. Kareneth tilted her head. You assumed I needed assistance. No, Ethan replied. I assumed you deserved it. Her markings flickered unexpectedly soft. A deep violet blue, the color of uncertainty and something else. She looked away, uncomfortable with what her body had revealed. Vraxians do not receive assistance. We receive deference or challenge, nothing in between. That sounds lonely, Ethan said quietly. Kareneth didn't answer. The silence deepened, not cold, not tense, but heavy with the weight of truths neither had spoken aloud before. Eventually, she said, this companionship, this partnership the algorithm forced, it is unlike anything I anticipated. How so? Kareneth exhaled, a slow, measured breath that sounded almost human. I expected incompetence. Dependence, obstruction. Instead, you adapt, you question, and you push back. That bothers you. It intrigues me. Ethan's heartbeat quickened, but he kept his expression steady. Well, you intrigue me too. Kareneth's gaze lifted sharply. Not hostile, not defensive, just open, for the first time. The fire cast shifting reflections across her eyes, softening the fierceness without diminishing it. Ethan realized then that she wasn't just fierce, she was disciplined, loyal, and shaped by a culture that equated vulnerability with peril. She had lived her entire life under the weight of expectation, and yet here she was letting it slip, just for a moment. Ethan, she said softly, the first time she had used his name without annoyance. Why did the algorithm bind us? We are opposites in every measurable way. Maybe that's the point, Ethan replied. Opposites create balance. Her markings warmed into a shifting glow. Intensity softened into curiosity, into possibility. Balance, she repeated, tasting the word like an unfamiliar dish. Before either could speak again, the night split with a distant, bone-deep roar. Both rose instantly, Kareneth with blade in hand, Ethan with scanner drawn. Her voice dropped into a quiet, lethal whisper. Something approached, the roar faded into the night, followed by an eerie quiet that made the mist feel heavier, thicker, almost alive. Ethan swept his scanner in a slow arc as Kareneth stepped forward, blade raised. Movement, Ethan whispered. 200 meters, large and irregular. Irregulars? It's limping. Kareneth's eyes narrowed, or dragging something. They moved through the crystalline brush with silent coordination, Kareneth clearing the front while Ethan tracked life signs. As they approached a cluster of jagged rock columns, Ethan froze. Multiple heat signatures, he whispered, human-sized. Kareneth's markings flashed with sudden urgency. The survey team. They rounded the final ridge and found them. 3 members of the missing team huddled inside a collapsed cave entrance, dusty, bleeding, exhausted. The 4th lay half-buried under debris, leg pinned beneath a slab of crystal-infused stone. When the survivors saw Ethan and Kareneth emerge from the shadows, relief washed over their faces so powerfully it nearly knocked Ethan off balance. You found us, one whispered. Thank God. Ethan knelt to assess injuries while Kareneth scanned the perimeter, every muscle taut. What happened? Ethan asked. The team leader's voice trembled. A burrower, massive, came out of the ground under us. The cave collapsed. We thought it went back below, but it's still out there. Kareneth stiffened, below us. Before Ethan could answer, the ground beneath them shuddered. Once, twice. A deep, resonant rumble rising from beneath the earth. Ethan's blood ran cold. Oh no. Kareneth's voice dropped into a deadly whisper. Brace. The ground erupted. A monstrous creature, something like a worm fused with armored plating and serrated mandibles, burst through the stone, showering shards in every direction. Its hide gleamed like molten metal, ridged and rippling with subterranean heat. The survivors screamed. Kareneth didn't. She lunged forward with no regard for her safety, blade flashing as she struck the creature's exposed ridge. Sparks exploded from the impact. Its armor was too thick. Ethan grabbed the buried team member under the arms. Kareneth distracted. Do not instruct me, move. The creature swung its massive head toward Kareneth, mandibles clacking like breaking bones. She dodged by a hair, carving a glowing arc along its jawline. Ethan pulled the trapped survivor free just as the burrower slammed its body down, destroying the exact spot they'd been moments earlier. Go, Ethan shouted. Get behind the ridge. The survivors stumbled away, half carried by one another. Kareneth kept the creature focused on her, leaping from rock to rock with breathtaking agility. But Ethan saw the truth. She was fast, she was skilled. She was extraordinary, but she was tiring, and the burrower was, Ethan scanned frantically. Its armor's weakest where the plates hinge back of the neck. Karenith rolled under a sweeping strike. Impossible angle. Not if you force it to raise its head. Karenith met his gaze, and in that split second, trust snapped into place like a blade locking into its sheath. She sprinted straight toward the creature, letting it commit to a downward strike. At the last moment, she veered aside, slashing its flank with just enough force to make it recoil, lifting its head, exposing the hinge. "Ethan!" she shouted. He was already running. The world narrowed to adrenaline and instinct. Ethan leapt onto a slanted boulder, using it as a platform to spring upward. The creature reared, mandibles wide. Karenith roared, "Now!" Ethan drove the emergency plasma cutter downward with every ounce of strength he had, plunging it deep into the exposed hinge. The creature convulsed. Light burst from its wound, a shriek tore through the night, and then... Silence, the burrower collapsed, twitching once before going still. Ethan fell backward, hitting the ground hard. Pain flared across his shoulders. He sucked in a breath, and saw Karenith standing over him, not angry, not evaluating, something else entirely. Her markings glowed a soft violet blue, a color he had never seen on her before, a color that meant emotion she'd never admit aloud. She knelt beside him. "You struck without hesitation." "You asked me to," Ethan said, breathless. She shook her head slowly. "No, you acted before I asked. You trusted your judgment and mine." Her hand hovered near his shoulder as if she wanted to check for injury but didn't know if she was allowed. Ethan lifted his hand, touching hers lightly. She froze. Not in fear, but in something rarer. Vulnerability. "Karenith," he said quietly. "You saved them and me." Her jaw tightened. "You saved me as well." A long silence stretched between them. Charged, electric, impossibly intimate among shattered